The following content is intended for a mature audience. Viewer discretion is advised. The Ark of Ham, Chapter 3. Illustrations were done based on commission. Artists were given a limited amount of information about the book before performing their artwork. Please give them the recognition, respect, and credit they deserve. Any inconsistency between what is said and what is seen is intentional by the author. That's me. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. With that being said, let's begin. The Pangea was now abuzz with activity. All along the central main body of the Pangea, poisonous materials that had been produced throughout the flight were now being placed into storage containers and being put deeper into the core, where they were welded in place as to ensure that they would not be moved. Other materials, such as old machining equipment or disregarded robots in need of repair, were being placed in other disposable containers and being fired down to the planet below. Although many of them would burn up in the atmosphere, what remained would hit the ground and be useful resources for the future colonists of this new world. Lotusburg, the flowery home of the synths, located at the front of the ship, had blossomed and opened its petals. The resulting metallic matter was now showering through the planet's atmosphere, creating a meteor shower as the pieces struck the ground, creating even more resources. Passageways had opened up throughout all the habitation rings, allowing the people of the Pangea to venture down below their ground level, all the way to the outer rings, and look out upon the infinite wonder of space. There were traditional news organizations located on the Pangea, on its various rings. Their signals could only penetrate to the ring next to them. And as Ring 3 was a dark zone, Ring 4 was unable to hear anything that was happening or going on within Rings 1 and 2. Rings 1 and 2 were abuzz with news feeds and discussions of what was to come on the planet below. A good-looking news anchor, who was unnaturally smooth in the face, was talking to a rickety old woman. They were in argument about political situations currently taking place on the Pangea. "It is absolutely disgusting," the old woman began. "They expect us to land on this world while we are already dealing with overpopulation and crime in the streets like we have never seen before." Excuse me, madam. What crime are you seeing in these streets?" "What crime? To think that you'd say something that ignorant. We see muggings, murder, drug trafficking, and human trafficking like we have never seen before." Never seen. This is all from the administration far before us. This is from the original captain of this ship who took control back when Ring 3 failed. And this is the result of his leadership. Now, we have this new captain who's likely going to lead us in a new direction. Why don't we just fall in line and do whatever he says? Fall in line. Listen to yourself. History books are filled with people who fell in line. And falling in line is usually what gets everyone killed. To think that you came from the University of Cambro, just as I have, is an absolute disgrace. Now, I'm insulted that you would say that, madam, because Ham was in the midst of watching the broadcast from a rail car that was currently descending to Ring 1. He was laughing at the current political situation of the entire ship. "These people are idiots," he remarked. "We're about to have a hard reset. Every single law they've ever passed, every convention they supposedly value, is going to be shaken to its core by this, because everyone's going to be really far apart, and above all else, they'll be free." Pangea smirked as well. "I can't help but wonder how complicated things are going to be between us synths and the humans." "That's a good point," replied Ham. "I didn't exactly tell them that all of you were sentient. I guess we can wait until that becomes more relevant and tell only those who need to know. No sense in getting everyone panicked. After all, I don't want them getting in the way of you guys doing your jobs." "Exactly. Or becoming violent towards us. Earth literature is filled with stories of artificial intelligence taking over humanity through some odd means. Yeah, I have seen those old stories, science fiction and the like. Didn't one of them involve detonating nuclear weapons? That's right, said Ham. Apparently, the artificial AI intelligence, which runs on electricity, is going to take over humanity by detonating weapons that disrupt electrical fields and destroy all technology on the planet. Ah, science fiction writers. Always good for a laugh, said Ham. As Ham looked outside the railcar, he could see hundreds of synths traveling down the spoke to the outside habitation ring. Many of them were walking, but they were also joined by small forklift robots. These machines had somehow stayed functional, even from the early days of departing the planet Earth. They were specially designed to carry boxes that would engage with their lifting function. They were much safer than the traditional forklift, and their AIs prioritized safety of all living entities around them. They even were some of the first to acknowledge the crew as sentient beings. Joining Ham in the railcar was also BO3, also known as Bo, as well as L96, a rather young crew that Pangaea had assigned to be Ham's personal assistant, should he require anything. Ham made eye contact with this much younger crew. So, do you have a name, like Bo does? My designation is L96. Yes, but should I be calling you something like a name? Like Lizzie or Beth or something like that? Or Tom or Harry, I can't tell if you're male or female. My designation is L96. I have not adapted any social protocols for gender. So, L96, what exactly do you do on the ship? Acknowledging query. Presenting answer. Following my original construction, I worked on Ring 4 for 5 years. My duty was to count produce and produce the numbers for the local occupants, then assist in the shipment of the produce up to Rings 1 and 2. I have recently been reassigned as your personal assistant. That's it? Asked Ham. That's your entire life story? That is correct, the machine answered. Bo interjected his opinion into the conversation. They are very young still. Although they have all the same access to information and knowledge that the rest of us synths have, they don't have their own individual personality. They don't know how to interact with organic beings the same way the rest of us do, and they don't have their own personal thoughts and opinions quite yet. Those form over a long basis of time. And as we don't feel emotion in the same way, emotions have to be acquired over deep, meaningful moments, rather than simply a gut response to needs and desires. We're just not as individual as humans are in the early stages. I understand, said Ham. Well, just stick by me, L96, and I'll try to make certain the job isn't too much for you to handle. I am certain I will be capable at my tasks. You are very simple-minded and will be easy to please. Sassy. I like her. Him. Whatever you are. I like this sprocket. My body does not contain any sprockets or cogs. Whatever, said Ham. Eventually their conversation was interrupted by gravity starting to shift to the front of the train car. Whoa! I guess as we get closer to the edge of Ring 1, these gravity plates are having difficulty counteracting the centrifugal force gravity. I don't suppose these plates have been replaced any time recently, have they? No, confirmed Pangaea. We don't have the resources to replace gravity plates that are still technically functional. They have to completely stop working and no longer serve their functionality in order for us to take them out of service. as long as they're not in danger of failing while a passenger is on board. I'm a passenger, and I'm on board, and this gravity plate is in no danger of failing, as I said. All right, I guess I'll have to believe you. It's not like I can open up the darn thing and take a look at it for myself right now. As they passed through the artificial sky to Ring 1, they began lowering down into the habitation rings. The gravity plate kept Ham stuck to the bottom of the rail car, as he should be, until eventually they leveled out. As he looked out the window, he saw a Navy checkpoint. "I would suggest you put your head down," suggested Pangaea. "The Navy is ignoring us for the most part because we're the crew. But if they see you, they might want to interact with you, and that should probably be avoided." "Righty-ho," said Ham, and he began to make himself more scarce within the railcar, as the Navy was marching back and forth, taking a look in sight of the hundreds of cars and cargo being transported onto the ring. They were pressed and had a hard time keeping up with the demand of individuals moving into the ring. "They have no actual authority," said Ham. "Why are you bothering to stop for them at all?" "If it makes the passengers happy for us to stop and show them the cargo, we are obliged to do it. We don't technically have to now, but we are continuing to allow them to do small searches just to make things more peaceful for the moment. Best not to create friction, after all." "Good idea," said Ham. The trolley car Ham was riding on was declared crew equipment and was being streamlined through the Navy checkpoint. Other such rail cars were being diverted into off-lines, and the occupants, residents of Ring 2, were going through the standard issue processes for disembarking on Ring 1. Ham watched as individuals went through these checkpoints, and the trolley car slowly advanced forward. Just a short ways from where they were traveling and in full view of Ham, individuals were standing in yellow circles, following a red line. They were spaced out approximately 10 feet apart. "What are they doing?" asked Ham. Pangaea looked on. "This is one of their screening processes for drugs, alcohol, anything you're really not supposed to have up on this ring, firearms and such. It is also a behavioral discipline test." "I see. About how long does it take?" "It takes approximately 5 minutes standing in each circle, and there are many circles. What they're doing is testing your temperament, seeing if you're the kind of uneducated individual from Ring 2 that will cause them problems. It is after this test that you are then given a compliance test along with several others to see exactly where you're supposed to be going and whether or not you're going to be shipped back to Ring 2. As Pangaea was explaining the process, within the line currently waiting outside the rail depots, individuals were standing in the circles. One such individual was beginning to lose his mental health at the worst possible time. Technically, he was allowed on Ring 1, but only if he control himself and not behave as he does on Ring 2. All these people be putting it in the basket." He began speaking in a strange slang tongue, something most people from Earth would not be able to understand, something developed only on Ring 2. "Be putting it in the basket, they owe me the nickel. They owe me the nickel and the bud. They be putting it all in the basket," he repeated over and over again. Eventually he began to pace back and forth as he talked to himself, and pointed at Navy folk who were looking on at him with disgust. Eventually, he made the mistake of stepping 1 foot out of the circle. Suddenly, a robot arm raised from a small machine platform not so far away. It scanned the intrusion of someone stepping out of the circle when they were not supposed to. The robot arm reached below its mechanical deck and attached a machine gun. before pointing forward and firing 10 rounds into the individual's chest. Within a second, he was dead. Everyone allowed his body to lie upon the ground. They did not make a move. Back on the rail car, Ham had seen everything and was in shock. "Holy shit!" exclaimed Ham. "Just stay calm. They can't see us anymore. We're moving past them. We're in the clear," reassured Pangaea. "Holy shit! They just shot a guy." "Just stay calm," reassured Pangaea. "What'd they shoot him for?" "There are certain behavioral requirements you have to meet in order to make it to this ring. It's their judicial system, and I cannot intervene. It's been like this for a long time." "Holy shit," said Ham. "Don't get me wrong, he looked like a kind of slummy thug too, but he didn't deserve that." "Things are very different here than they were back on Earth. Earth might have gotten rid of problems like people allowing themselves to become homeless, and mental health was a priority of making certain that communities would remain in a good state. But things are different here on the Pangaea." "Holy shit!" That was all Ham could say. Pangaea had to eventually grasp his hands and force him to look at her. Even though it was a drone, in a way, Ham could see her within. It didn't matter what face she was currently residing in. "Relax, Ham. This is all temporary. Just repeat that to yourself. It's only for a short while. Once we get through all of this, and we put them all down on the planet, it'll be you, me, and the ocean. Nothing else. You'll die of old age before having to speak to any of them." "Okay," Ham said. "You're right. I can make it through this. I just gotta stay calm." He sat down on the floor to hide from any individuals looking into the rail car. Bo scooted his muscular body along the seats to be over top of Ham. "Don't worry too much about it. In the event that there's anything violent going on, just hide behind me. I'll be a perfect meat shield. I highly doubt they have anything large enough to get through my body. And we'll make our escape as soon as possible." "It's fine," said Ham. "I am trained to deal with this. I just didn't think I would see something so reminiscent of old Earth history in front of my face." "And they all think this is normal, huh?" "It's normal for Ring 1, explained Bo. "The missionaries are the reason for some of these dystopian policies, although it's the Navy who actually enforces these policies." "How does that work?" asked Ham. "Well, in theory, they are part of the same political system. They're just two sides of the same coin. The Navy wants peace and order, and the missionaries want segregation and preservation." "That's so stupid," said Ham. "I agree," replied Bo. "But smart wasn't exactly a criteria for boarding the Pangaea. I believe the Earth idiom that would apply to this situation would be, 'Welcome to the Old West.'" The rail car continued its travels through several mayoral districts on Ring 1. Each mayoral district they so happened to be traveling through was controlled by the missionaries, and as Ham looked outside the window, he saw their strange view of how society should work. Each mayoral district under complete control of the missionaries had several smaller towns within them. These microtowns were usually themed to a particular Earth culture. One such culture that Ham was looking at was France. The entire district was made of brick, and there was many wrought iron decorations all about, with fleur-de-lises everywhere. French baguettes were on every store shelf, and it seemed that every place that sold anything also was a bakery. Many individuals were seen outside painting imagery of their own small town. As Ham passed by another, he saw what appeared to be Asian-inspired themed buildings, with individuals outside in wooden and paper armor, practicing with wooden swords. They also seemed to be practicing archery. As well as that, they were robed in what appeared to be long kimonos, and were wearing wooden shoes. Ham seemed confused. They're stereotypes. Pangaea looked at Ham with confusion. What do you mean? These aren't the actual practices of Earth, at least not as I remember them. And I've seen some of these before on Earth. These are just stereotypes of that, things you'd see in really old media, back when television was first introduced to the general population. Who exactly runs the missionaries? Pangaea began to scan historical documents stored inside of her computer banks from Earth itself. It would appear that the original founders of the missionary divisions were all from the same location on planet Earth. Really? Said Ham. And where exactly is that from? The colony of the Gulf. Oh God, no, said Ham. There is not much data on this colony. Where exactly are they from? The colony of the Gulf, they're all from the Gulf of Mexico. So they're from an Earth city, like everyone else. They're from an Earth city, but it was not like everywhere else. The colony of the Gulf was originally founded as a social experiment, the last bastion of communism, the final test to prove that communal living and collectivism would actually lead humanity over the horizon. It was first built as a reaction to us colonizing Jupiter. You seem to be wary of these individuals. Well, those individuals were not wary of. It was the original people who actually built the darn thing and lived on it. They ended up dying as a result of their communist ideals. In their perfect communist society, individuals were appointed to certain tasks based on their, skill sets, I guess, but it was honestly based on personal grudges, vendettas, or bribery. Some things led to other things, and the colony ended up starving to death. Apparently, some idiot watered all their crops with salt water. At first, they demanded foreign aid, but then eventually they just went dark. By the time we made it inside, that is, the rest of the world, we had found that chemical weapons had been deployed, large numbers of people were dead, and it was stuff out of history books. Truly a horrible sight to behold. Dead children lying in the street, and people having hung themselves from streetlights, throwing themselves out of buildings, and killing each other at mass. And for every healthy corpse you found a withered skeleton who had starved to death. It was truly horrible. That was the last bastion of communism, of course. It stopped shortly after. Eventually, everyone repopulated the city, as we couldn't just leave the giant floating thing empty, and there were still occupants who refused to leave. When I left Earth, that place was exactly the same as every other place on Earth, and they all ran to the same economic plan, and it was healthy and prosperous, but there was worry about an underground community still present within that place that dreamed of this weird utopia, this place where people were told what to think, what to do, and how to spend their money. And I suspect some of them seem to have gotten on the Pangaea, and those are the ones who are now running the missionaries, am I right? That's correct. Looking at historical data, some of it does seem eerily similar to the place you're describing, although historical information is limited. Yeah, that's for a reason, said Ham. We didn't want any of that crap coming with us to this new world. I suppose we were wrong to keep it hidden. Only allowed it to grow unchallenged. 6 times the trolley stopped, and 6 times Ham got out and fixed a problem. His presence was only a formality. All he had to do was okay the work that the crew had already performed. He told them they were doing an excellent job, and as far as he could see, he saw no mechanical failure. However, many of these problems were quite serious, and would certainly end in disaster if they were not remedied correctly. so he did take his job seriously as he looked over their repairs. Many of the problems were just a result of age, nothing more. When the trolley stopped once again, Ham got ready to disembark, but was stopped by Pangaea. "What's wrong?" asked Ham. "This is not an engineering issue. This is a captain issue. This requires your participation on the captain level. Are you ready?" "Captain? Okay. What exactly is the problem?" "This small section of this mayoral district is completely filled with stowaways, and you need to approve their departure to the New World, or deny them, and then we'll have to figure out what to do." "Stowaways, huh? I can't wait to see this." As Ham got off the trolley and looked around at the small buildings around him, he realized he was physically too tall to fit into many of their doorways. Did a bunch of children stow away? What the heck? Faces began to peer out through windows and doors at him, and he realized that the entire town was filled with dwarves. Well, would you look at that? Dwarvism. That's a pretty uncommon disease. I've never actually seen it myself. Ham made his way into an important-looking building. It wasn't the district center, but was the town hall for this smaller community. It was the only building in the entire place that had a doorway Ham could fit through without ducking his head down. Eventually, he came to an important office, with Pangaea following behind, as well as L96. As Ham was led into an office, as well as Pangaea and L96, he was met by two individuals sitting inside. The first was a very short Scottish man, dressed as a cowboy. He was this community's sheriff. The other was an impressively tall woman, even taller than Ham. She had the most aggressively pink hair Ham had ever seen in his life. Her head moved from side to side. This jerking motion created a cracking sound that would occasionally resonate from her neck. And she had a resting face posture that caused both her bottom and upper teeth to be visible, despite the fact she didn't have the teeth for showing to others. Everything about her posture, her mannerisms, and the way she presented herself seemed aggressive and unnecessary. Ham didn't quite like it, but he sat down politely nonetheless. "Hello, stowaways," Ham began. The tall woman seemed to get angry, and made a strange guttural sound with her throat before berating Ham. "Ah! We do not call them that. They are undocumented passengers." "All right then, that would be a stowaway. Hello, stowaways. What can I do for you?" "Ah! We don't call them that." The tiny cowboy interrupted the woman before she could continue to berate Ham, and got straight to the point. The man began to speak in a language that Ham couldn't understand at all. "Crap, I don't speak Scottish," he said, as he immediately recognized the language. It's an offshoot of English, but I'm completely defenseless against it. L96 leaned into his ear and began to translate. "Mr. Ham, we are the descendants of people who were rejected from coming aboard the Pangaea. Due to guidelines made by the missionaries, we were not always able to breed with the rest of the ship's passenger log. Many of us are therefore still declared as stowaways, and we require your permission to exit and join the rest of the colonists down the planet below." Stowaways, huh? Why did you stow away on the Pangaea? They knew it would be a lifelong venture. They would die in space before ever making it to the New World. The small cowboy explained. "Back on Earth, my dad told me about the stories that he was told by his father and he was told by his father, that we were persecuted, declared some kind of biological deficiency, something that needed to be cured. It's true, the original look of dwarfism, and how it originally manifested in the human genome came with a lot of medical issues, but those were weeded out. Eventually, though, they went for the size of our heads, the size of our arms, our height, what made us unique and different. They sought to purge all of us from that world. So, we hid in luggage. We hid aboard the Pangea, burst out only a day after it departed, too late to send us back home, and we managed to stay here ever since. The missionaries offered us some kind of safe haven. Ham started to think, if I remember correctly, if you were having a baby in a hospital on Earth, and it was diagnosed with potential dwarfism, that would have been cured. Exactly, the small cowboy said. I am not some sickness to be cured. I'm a person just like everyone else. The tall mayor decided to cut him off at that point and begin berating Ham. And frankly, you should be ashamed as an engineer of this oppressive structure around us. You mean the ship? Exactly. You chose people to board this ship, simply based on whether or not you could control them, and not based on their cultural distinctions and how they could provide a new life to the people of this new world. We chose them based on whether or not they were healthy. That's why the midgets got left behind, is because they were declared unhealthy, and I was not part of that selection process. I build the gravity plates. I'm just an engineer. You'd have to take it up with those who are part of the selection process. I don't agree with it. And seeing as I'm in control, yeah, you guys can jump down to the planet like everyone else. Fair start. Survival of the fittest. Best of luck to you. Ugh, that is ridiculous. They deserve compensation for your prejudicial behavior over the many generations that they were forced to fly through space as pariahs and segregated from the rest of society. Segregated? Who segregated them? Because they cannot be placed into a proper cultural background, they are declared non-compliant. And that is the fault of the original makers of the Pangea. They do not need to suffer the same fate as the actual non-compliant. So we allow them to have their own subculture here on Ring 1, just like every other person deserves. Huh? Ham didn't understand. The woman began a long, preachy lecture. It felt as though it lasted for hours. It may as well have, for how bored Ham was and how long and lengthy she was speaking. But to summarize it, she had regurgitated the points of the missionaries, who firmly suggest that the ship's primary goal was not to install humanity upon a new world, but rather its individual cultures, mirrored from Earth. Of course, Ham knew the truth. These were nothing more than collectivists trying to control people, race hustlers, using their individual cultures and the color of their skin as an excuse to control people, so he did not listen. During the long and boring conversation, L96 began to lean into the small cowboy and inspect him closer. After a short time, a three-toed metal foot began to carry them across the room, and they moved away from Ham's right side to his left side. The small cowboy, for the most part, had ignored the existence of the crew. But now, he could not ignore this one's existence. What he once believed to be a soulless machine was now slowly approaching him, as his eyes began to glance away from the conversation in front of him and began to look upon the metal reptilian now bearing down on his position. "Can I help you there, my strange robot?" "You are dressed as a cowboy," L96 stated. The small cowboy looked at his leather boots, his leather chaps, and his leather Stetson hat, and confirmed individual suspicions. "I am a sheriff. That does make me a cowboy, in a sort of way. Cowboys ride horses. You are too small to ride a horse." "I disagree. I would be preferable to ride a horse, as I would be much lighter weight and therefore the horse could run faster." L96 began calculating the information, checking historical data to confirm his statement. Horse jockeys were typically of a smaller nature, but cowboys were of a larger nature. Well, I suppose then I'll be this new world's first smallest cowboy. It was at that moment that L96 began to form some personal opinions, thoughts that were all its own. These thoughts had never existed before. They weren't simply information to be looked up from the ship's mainframe or computer, or to be stored away for later reference. This was simply a personal desire, likely L96's first. You should ride on me. I should be your horse. While this strange interaction was taking place, Ham was only just a few feet away, being lectured on missionary ideals. As the tall individual lecturing him could not be reasoned with, Ham was mostly ignoring her. That was, until he picked up on what was possibly about to transpire, only a few feet away from him. "Hold up, lady," Ham interrupted the missionary. "You're stupid and annoying, and something more important is about to happen. Am I about to witness a midget Scottish cowboy riding a robot dragon?" L96 and the small sheriff looked back at Ham. They then shook their heads up and down. "This is without a doubt the greatest moment of my life," Ham said. The Scottish cowboy had to laugh. "So, here's the funny thing. I do actually have a saddle. It's just in my personal office over there, but it's not something I'm entirely proud of having, and I don't pull it out for any old occasion. But since we're having fun, I don't think it would hurt to just pull it out real fast." "I am down," said Ham. "Do it." L96 actually became excited, one of its first displays of emotion. "I would like to wear this saddle. Where is it currently located?" While the small sheriff began to escort L96 over to his personal office, the missionary had finally regained her composure after suddenly being offended and her face turning bright red. "I cannot believe you'd use that word." "Which word?" Ham replied. "You know which word. We don't use that word. We don't call them that anymore." "Call what who?" "We do not call them midgets anymore." "Oh, you don't? Well, that word does enter and exit popularity quite infrequently. What are you calling them now?" "We call them lesser people." "Oh. Yeah, I'm not going to call them that. That sounds dumb. And you're dumb for saying it." She was flabbergasted by Ham's statement. She was unable to accept anyone denying her authority for even a moment. "And you are part of the system that had oppressed them, that had prevented them from being able to board this ship properly like everyone else. They had to hide inside of carry-on bags and luggage in order to enter the Pangea from the start." "I'm aware of that," Ham said. "And as far as I'm concerned, they're passengers just like everyone else now. They get a fair shot at building their own lives on this new world, and I wish them the best of luck at it." "And are you going to compensate them for this disparity?" "Nope," replied Ham. "Not at all? No. I'm going to give them nothing. I'm going to stiff them, not pay the bill, and then let them go on their merry way. They'll be happier that way." "Who are you to decide that?" "Who am I to decide that? Heh. Didn't you hear the sky? I'm the captain. I decide that." This is completely unacceptable. I cannot believe that you could be so audacious to simply, what is that? Suddenly, the missionary woman lost all stake in the argument, and only stood there staring at what was standing in the doorway, just behind Ham, outside of his range of vision. He couldn't help but be a little curious, so he turned around. Ham immediately got excited and threw both his hands up in the air. "Yes! Yes!" Ham said. "This is the greatest day of my life." Now walking into the room was L96. Completely covering L96's body was many leather straps, all riveted and bound together, leading up to a saddle now fixed to L96's back. The saddle was clearly not designed for horses. It had the complete wrong angle. Rather, this saddle was clearly designed to be worn by humans. Riding on top of the saddle was the small Scottish sheriff. His face was bright red, and his hat was tipped down slightly so that he wouldn't have to make eye contact with anyone else in the room. Completing the absurdity of the look was the noticeably shiny red ball, now asphyxed, in L96's mouth. "I am so sorry," said the small sheriff. "I tried to tell this darn thing to only put the saddle on and nothing else. But it didn't listen to me. It donned all the gear on, put me on its back, and then barged right in here. I've never had a crew be so disobedient before." Ham was beyond excited, jumping up and down with pure ecstasy and joy. "This is truly the greatest day of my life. There is a tiny Scottish cowboy now riding a robotic dragon that is currently inside of bondage gear. My life is complete. I can die a happy man now." The missionary woman didn't know what to say. She simply sat down and went silent, clearly overloaded by the situation happening in front of her. "How long have you had that thing stored away?" The tiny sheriff's face had turned so red, his hat was beginning to smoke. But he maintained his composure as best he could, and simply replied, "I have the right to remain silent and refuse to answer any questions going further." Ham and the small sheriff joked for a bit about the absurdity of the bondage gear, but after it was taken off and he was put back down on the ground, Ham got serious. "I do acknowledge, though, that you probably are going to need a little tiny bit of help. Down on the planet below, there's no pre-built infrastructure, nothing to help you guys out, and you're going to have to really tough through it, chop down trees and build your own homes. You'll have to do everything yourself, even farming. So just to make certain that there's no great cleansing of the little folk that's going to hang in our history while we form this new world, how about I get some crew volunteers to come and help you guys out? They'll just live alongside you guys, carry you if you need to be carried somewhere. You can even use that bonded saddle." "Volunteers?" asked the sheriff. "You mean you're going to order some of them to come and help us?" "No, I can't do that," said Ham. "They're people, just like you and me. They're fully sentient creatures. I can't order them about." The small sheriff looked back at L96, who was still wagging its tail. That's why the crew was so happy to put on the saddle. "That is correct," answered L96. Ham chuckled. "Don't worry. The crew are not like humans. They don't want and need the same things we do, so they act quite differently. And they legitimately enjoy our company, so you don't have to worry about them like strangling you in your sleep. They will help you." "All right," said the sheriff. "I can agree to that. But we don't have any real proper housing for you guys to stay in that is tall enough for you." L96 shook its head up and down. "I acknowledge that. We will construct a barn of sorts." Ham was giggling. I think they're into pony play. You might have awakened something." The sheriff laughed, but finally, the missionary mare had regained her composure and slammed her fist on the table. "This is completely absurd, and I need to speak to my superiors." Suddenly, she got up from the table and marched out of the room. "Well, there goes that little secret. I was hoping I could keep that under wraps for longer, but you guys needed to know the truth just for functional reasons, so oh well, we tried." A few minutes later, as larger crew were carrying large crates of supplies, farming tools, seeds, and rations, into the town center, the sheriff had called everyone to gather round and listen to him. He rode atop L96 on a saddle, this time without the unnecessary gear, much to L96's disappointment, and addressed all the local townspeople. With his thick Scottish accent, Ham had a difficult time understanding, especially as he was adding volume, but the rest of the townsfolk seemed to understand him perfectly fine. "Listen up," he said. "Mr. Ham, the captain of the ship, has an announcement that directly concerns us. It is in regards of the fact that we are stowaways on this ship." "Go ahead, Mr. Ham," he said. "Address them." "Hello, everyone," said Ham. Your ancestors were left behind on Earth because they were told they didn't measure up. The crowd laughed. Well, they didn't take that lying down. They stuffed themselves in a luggage and then burst out here on the Pangea a day later. I'm going to be real with all of you. That's pretty badass. As far as I'm concerned, you've earned your place here on the Pangea as much as anyone else has. And now that this town is officially a colony of this new world, me and the sheriff worked out a name for it. L96, while Ham was talking, had stepped up onto one of the crates of supplies, carrying the sheriff on its back. The sheriff proudly declared, "This here is from henceforth the town of Midgington." The crowd broke up into cheers, as Ham couldn't stop himself from breaking out into laughter. Ham looked around. I wonder where that missionary bitch went. She seemed pretty upset about this entire arrangement. Oh well. I'm certain that won't come back to bite me in the ass later. Ham stayed in the small town for a few more hours, mostly to get himself something to eat. When payment was being discussed with the local people, they requested that he offer over a missionary cultural enrichment card. He wasn't certain what that was, and they explained it was a small paper card that had many places for them to punch holes with a hole punch. Once the card was completely punch-filled with holes, it was then considered invalid and therefore garbage. Individuals all around Ring 1 and 2 would have to purchase these cards. They were quite expensive, and it was the only way you could purchase certain materials that were not considered for you. For example, for a Japanese person to buy a sombrero, it would cost nearly 7 hole punches, along with the general cost using money for the sombrero. This meant it was a prohibitive measure to stop you from buying things that were not, according to the missionaries, meant for you. Ham refused to use the cards and suggested that everyone in the town do the same. He said that was stupid, that they were ignorant for even going along with such an ignorant practice. The townsfolk agreed, and they themselves started shredding the cards en masse. Pangea finally stepped in. She had remained silent this entire time. "Ham, I'm looking all over the ship, and I've been staying silent as to not make my presence known, but I think you should leave now. Go to the next job site and try to keep yourself more scarce." "I'm on it," he said. "I'm heading back to the train now." Ham continued his job fixing errors around the ship. For the most part, things just needed to be signed off, but occasionally he had to actually solve a problem. He didn't always feel confident in his abilities to solve these particular issues, but luckily Pangea had a wealth of knowledge for him to access. One such job site was now a large hole that they had dug into the ground. When Ham walked up to the hole, he looked inside and whistled. "What the heck are we doing here?" Pangea was happy to answer. "We are digging a very large hole." Ham looked down inside the hole to see several crew members that had replaced their arms with excavator arms, and even their tails with excavator arm tails, and were moving large chunks of dirt and rock out of the way. "I can see that. Why is that necessary?" One of the chambers for the main rocket thrusters that offset the weight of this particular ring section appears to be having a major malfunction and requires replacement, but we can't get it inside the room. Even through the secret access doors far below the ground, we cannot get inside. "Is that so?" said Ham. "Why is that?" "The room is reporting that there is an increase in pressure on the inside, but we've already cracked into it, and what we believe is the problem is that it's flooded with water." "I wonder why that is." Before the excavation process commenced, there was a small shed above this ground, where there was a well drilled down into the bottom. We believe the well was dug a bit too deep, and had actually pierced this particular structure. This structure does stick up quite a bit further than most other structures below ground, so it makes sense that they didn't understand that they shouldn't dig that far down. "A drill on a spaceship. Well, I suppose that was something we were risking. Let's head down there and see what it looks like. BO3, or Bo, as well as L96, assisted Ham in getting down to the bottom of the hole so that he could see it all for himself. Once down at the bottom of the hole, he came across a large dome of metal with a hole poked right in the top of it. I'm guessing this is where the well pipe was led. Judging from the look of things, it was a functional well. Were people using it when you destroyed the building above? No, answered L96. According to local records, this was a common place that young teenagers would hang out at, to drink alcohol underaged, perform drugs, or have sexual relations with each other. Ah, said Ham. That must have been one gross shed you had to tear down. There was also some detailed newspaper articles about this shed. It appeared the town people gave this shed a nickname. Would you like to hear some of the names they have given it over the years? That's not necessary, said Ham. I had my own childhood places that I would go to have some fun at, if you know what I'm saying. I don't need to hear about another person's. Very well. Ham bent down to look inside the hole that was punched through the metallic dome. A foul, rotting stench came from the hole and entered Ham's nostrils. Oh, good gravy! I can tell this well hasn't been maintenance in a while. What is down there? The liquid was already being pumped up into a large container. As well, multiple crew were already trying to cut off the large dome so it could be lifted up via crane. But Ham was still taken back by the smell. It only got worse when the lid was finally popped off and he could look down inside. All of the equipment appeared to be caked in mud, and as the mud was dug away, cloth bags were revealed to be what buried the equipment. These cloth bags were removed, one at a time, and brought up and placed on the ground. What are these? Ham asked. Pangea did a quick scan of all local historical documents and colloquialisms of the local area. She then moved her body between the bags and Ham and told him not to go near them, to just focus on repairing the ship. But Ham didn't like that attitude. What are you hiding from me? I'd like to see what's inside those bags. No, you wouldn't, replied Pangea. Let's just get this fixed and then focus on getting down to the planet below. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Pangea, move aside now. I don't think that would be best. Pangea? Ham scolded her. She moved aside to allow him to inspect the bags. The cloth of the bag was heavily decayed. It took minimal effort for Ham to grab it with both hands and rip it open, spilling the contents out on the ground. Now laying before Ham was what he could easily recognize as a child's skeleton, the skull looking back at him from the ground. What the hell is this? Pangea used the drone that she was currently controlling to push Ham away from what he was witnessing. The missionaries, she explained, they don't allow for interracial breeding or for the mixing of cultures. Any such resulting children have to be sent down to Ring 2. So sometimes when parents don't want their children to suffer on Ring 2, they... Shut up, Ham interrupted. Just shut the hell up. Shut the hell up. Everyone just shut up. Shut up, he exclaimed. Pangea did so. She knew that he would not take this news well, and frankly, he was taking it better than she expected. She wanted to comfort Ham further and explain things, but she was interrupted by a proximity alarm. Something was moving for their current position. As Ham climbed his way out of the hole, he was in no mental state to notice that the ground was starting to shake. He also didn't notice that 2 armored naval trolleys came down on the rails, one in front of the rail car he had traveled to the job site on, one behind. Both of them were double-storied and carried a large number of naval officers. The men and women jumped out of the trolley quickly and began surrounding the crew who were working on the hull. Ham, we need to go, said Pangea, but she still couldn't totally grasp his attention. He was still in a state of shock. BO3, or Bo, leapt into action. He grabbed Ham and began walking him to the other side of the hole. He tried to move fast, but not so fast as to be considered a target. The other crew made themselves more visible and began walking towards the Navy, in the hopes that they would miss out on the fact that Ham was being extracted from the area. Unfortunately, a lookout from the top of the trolley spotted Ham. He communicated to the others via his small personal device that what they were looking for was here, and directed them to move in on Ham immediately and seize him. The crew wouldn't allow for this. They grabbed some of the Navy's weapons and tried to defuse the situation by pushing them back and allowing Bo to escape. But as they went weapons hot, guns were fired, and Ham was finally pulled out of his state of shock by what he heard as a familiar sound. Ham may have been trained to serve as the ship's captain. He was perfectly capable of making one or two heartless decisions for the greater good, but this was far outside of his wheelhouse. On the roof of the 2 armored Navy trolleys, 2 Navy gunner commanders focused down Ham and Bo, carrying him away. They leveled their weapons towards Bo's legs and pulled the trigger, firing 2 shots. Suddenly, Bo was rendered unable to move and fell on top of Ham's body. Ham hit the ground with a thunk, feeling the gravel and dirt grind into his flesh. He tried to squeeze out from underneath Bo, but he was too heavy, and was forced to lay there as he listened to continuous gunfire. After only a minute or two, the gunfire started to slow and settle down. Ham was still trying to free himself from underneath Bo's body, but couldn't seem to pull himself out. Ham heard walking coming towards him in the gravel, and as he looked to the side, he saw 2 black boots standing over him. Ham didn't know this, but it was a Navy commander's uniform. The woman wearing it was looking down at him while holding one of their weapons. "What the hell are you shooting at me for?" asked Ham. The woman didn't answer. She only raised her boot and brought it down on Ham's face with a mighty stomp. As the woman started to turn away, Ham spoke up. "Ow, you fucking bitch! What the hell was that for?" She turned back around in surprise. "I was trying to knock you out." "Well, you didn't. All you did was kick me in the head. Fuck you." "Well, I was given orders to knock you out, so I'm gonna have to kick you again." "Don't!" She tried once more to knock Ham out, which was also unsuccessful. "Stop kicking me in the fucking head, you bitch," Ham said. The woman scratched her head in confusion. "I swear this normally works. I'm gonna have to choke him out. You all focus on getting the big robot off of him." The woman awkwardly lowered herself down on top of Ham's head. Once sitting on top of him, she surrounded him with her legs and began to squeeze together. "You fucking bitch," Ham said as he tried to strike her with several blows from his fists. "Stop resisting," she said. "I gotta choke you out." "Well, you're not good at it," Ham refuted. After several awkward moments of her trying to strangle Ham nearly to death, a man walked up carrying a small needle. Madam, we can knock him out chemically." "Do it," said Ham from between her legs. "Oh yeah, that would probably work much better." He gave him a poke, and suddenly, Ham's vision started to fade to black. End of Chapter 3. Thank you all so much for listening to the story thus far. If you'd like to be notified of a future chapter when it comes out, all you have to do is like, comment, and of course, subscribe. If you're interested in looking at work-in-progress concept art for some of the things that are talked about in the story, all you have to do is follow me on Twitter. Eventually, I'm probably going to post a lot of the different little work-in-progress pieces, even concepts that'll never get implemented into the story or concepts I've abandoned. We'll eventually make it over to Twitter, and they'll just be posted as a bit of interesting trivia to look at. And of course, credit to the artists that worked on the cover art here for Chapter 3. They just did such a phenomenal job. The uniforms look exactly as I described them. They were meant to be a combination of both the Republican-controlled Union and the Democrat-controlled Confederacy from the American Civil War, for those of you who don't live in America. And they just did a wonderful job. The Navy themselves are based on LARPers, and of course the original LARPers, Civil War reenactors, because why not? It just seems so fitting. And I just can't believe what a good job they did. So if you want to go check out this artist and look at more of their work, they left their information on their credit card, which I asked them specifically to make. And you should read it. I asked them to put any sort of trivia that they wanted to say personally about the piece or about the story on that card. So it's just some interesting trivia for you. And just check them out and give them all the respect that they deserve. They have worked so hard to make this happen, and I'm just so thankful for them. But I think it's time we end, and with that, I'll be saying goodbye.